Hey, I'm Daniel with Powell Cams, and this is going to be episode 2 in our Camshaft 101 series. Stay tuned. All right, so in this episode, I think we're going to talk about cores and like core specs. Just like a finished camshaft, cam cores are sized in a way just like a finished cam. So a core is, it already has a LSA established, it already has an intake center line established, it already has a 50 duration established, and a lobe lift established. So maybe a misconception, and this is going to go over into like stock factory roller cams, or even an existing cam that you already have that you may want reground. All this will apply. So you know, for any given engine, the core manufacturer might have, you know, 100 part numbers available, and then on top of that, like we have specific, we call them UGLs, unground lobe. That's what that stands for. So when we get a core, and I've got a core video all about cores. I'll link that in the description of this video so you can see more in depth what I'm talking about. But the core is completely finished. The journals are ground, the ends are ground, the bolt holes, the dial pin, the distributor gear, or the drive gear, all of that's done, the fuel pump lobe. But the actual lobes themselves are just roughed in. They're milled. So there's a special machine called a lobe mill that works similar to a cam grinder, except instead of having a grinding wheel, it has a big large disc with carbide teeth on it. So it just roughs the lobe in to a given number, and so it's really coarse. And then they heat treat it, and then they grind the mains and straighten it and all that jazz. So when they come into us, everything is finished except the lobes themselves. And like I say, it's you know, if we use a similar example, let's say the UGL, you know, this is a hydraulic roller, you know, some kind of street deal. Let's say the UGL is 230 at 50, and then say it's got the lobe lift is 350, and it's on a 110 plus 4. Okay, so with this core, you couldn't make, like, if you wanted, say you wanted a 255 with 375 lobe lift, and you wanted it on 114 plus 2. So we don't have enough material to make this cam out of this core. So generally speaking, what we can do, because, and don't laugh at my drawing skills here, but say you got a large lift, large duration cam lobe, all right, regardless of what core it's on, you know, it's big, whatever, it's 270 at 50 and 425 lobe lift. And then you've got another lobe that's, let's say, is 220 at 50 with a 300 lobe lift. So I'm going to draw those two lobes on top of one another to try to illustrate the problem. So we're gonna start first. So we're gonna pretend this is our center. This is the center of the lobe, the center line. All right, so if we have this, whatever, this the large lift, large duration, so it's gonna look something like this. And then if we've got a small lift, small duration, it's gonna look more like this, right? So the center line is still in the same place of these two lobes. So if you send in a cam, or you have a core that already is whatever 425 lobe lift, well, you can see here's the base circle, right? So if we just drew a circle, this is where it would be. And then this one would be the same way, it would be like this. So we can make this cam with really low lift. It's easy to take base circle away. But this cam here that's already got a large lobe lift, well, we can't add this material back. So the only way we can reduce the lift of this cam is we're gonna have to take it off the top, because you can't put it back on the bottom. So what happens is you've got this lobe, that's whatever it is now. And it's got, the base circle's already been reduced, because that's how you add lift, as you reduce the base circle. So when you have, because I get people all the time that call and they've got some solid roller that's big, 260, 270 at 50 with 400 plus lobe lift, and they want it to be a hydraulic roller, a street cam. And the only way that we can do that is, like I say, we got to take it all off the top. And so keep in mind that, the heat, if we just draw an imaginary line, this is the heat treat area. So it's only, in an 8620 core, it's about 100 thousandths deep after it's ground. On an induction hardened core, it'll probably be double that. So you've got a little more room to play with in an induction hardened core, but in an 8620, you just have very little room. So if we come in here and take all that off the top, you can just about guarantee the spot on the cam, this at max spring pressure, is gonna have the least amount of heat treat, or no heat treat left. And so that generally is just not what you want. And the same kind of problem happens with, let me clean up my horrid drawing. One of these days I'm gonna get somebody that can do all that fancy animation and make it all super nice and professional like, but we don't have that problem today. All right, so if we've got, say this is 110. So if you send in a cam, or you already have a core that's roughed in at 110, and most of these OEM cores are 112, 114, 116, they're pretty wide. And most of them don't have any advance built into them. They're just straight up, because the duration's so small already that you just don't need any advance. So like we had it this week, a guy had a stock cam, and again, this is just most, there may be some variations, but pretty much a stock roller cam engine that's fuel injected, the duration is gonna be in the high 190s at 50 on the intake, and probably around 200 to 205 on the exhaust. That's what most of them are. Some are a little smaller, there might be some a little bigger, but that's usually where they're at. And you know, your older stuff, your older like flat tappet carbureted stuff would be ground on like a 112 LSA. A lot of this newer EFI stuff is 113, 14, 16, 17. You know, like a lot of the LS truck stuff is like 117, most of that junk. I see some maybe 116, but most of it's 117, and it's like 190. 196 at 50 on the intake and 200, 203 on the exhaust, somewhere along in there. And generally there's no advance, so it'll just be 117 plus a 0, and they're like I'm trying to remember, like 270 Lobe lift. I mean, it's super small Lobe lift. So like when we regrind them, we put 300 Lobe lift, so it takes them from like 450 or 460 at the valve to 510 at the valve, somewhere along in that window, and it works really good. But again, that really wide LSA just, you know, it just kills it. If they made something that was tight, you know, 108, 110, and you could put a really small duration on it but still bigger than factory, it would be an awesome little truck cam, you know, just a torque kind of deal, but it just don't exist. So the moral of the story, the cam that was in question, it was a 114 LSA. The customer wanted it to be 108. There's no possible way on the planet that you're going to move 6 degrees of Lobe separation. I mean, 1 or 2 degrees off of the side of the Lobe is a lot of material. I mean, it's really moving a lot of material. And to move 6 degrees, I mean, it's just gonna just plow off of one side. And then when you plow off of one side, as you're grinding, nothing's touching over here. So you're just taking it, and then you end up with like a flat. And so you really have to take the peak down. You just have to keep grinding. And you won't be hitting anything but the peak up here. And so you've got to take a bunch off to get to, because, you know, like we talked about, lift is the base circle diameter, basically, the difference in the base circle to the peak. Well, duration is how wide. So if you've got a Lobe that's like this is the top of it. Well, this is, you know, whatever duration. And then if you had the same deal like this, well, this will be a lot less duration. So if you've got already a narrow Lobe, like a low duration Lobe, the only way we can make it wide is to make it shorter, because the Lobe is getting wider as it comes to the base circle. So it's just got to get shorter and shorter and shorter to add more and more duration. So you're running out of room. So that's why it's really hard to do much with a stock core or even a small UGL. And in the same way, because eventually you know, again, we get the comment, especially like on some of our regrind videos, people make the comment, you know, well, what do you do about losing lift? You regrinding it, you losing lift. And they assume because we're grinding something off the Lobe that lift suffers. And the problem is I'm regrinding these cams and I'm putting them back exactly like they were. So we're not only are we not losing lift, we're not losing duration either. We're putting them right back where they were. And the confusion, and I'm gonna make a simulation. I'm gonna just make a little deal with 2 valves and 2 different Lobes, and I'm gonna make them big duration and little duration, and that way we can just roll it over and visually show you how that little Lobe is actually bigger than the big Lobe. And you know, it's counterintuitive, but big lift roller cams have little bitty lobes, and low lift stock cams have really big lobes, and that's what confuses people, I think, you know, because the issue is not the size of the lobe. The issue is how wide is the lobe, and what is the difference between the base circle diameter and the lift. So this is what determines what's happening. You know, if you have a really small base circle, like for instance, you know, we're used to seeing a cam lobe, you know, if we've got a base circle, we're used to seeing it come up at an angle like that. Well, I mean, sometimes you just run out of room, so you have to not go in, you have to go out. So I've got some, you know, they're like drag race specific 500 lobe lift, big block lobes. And the duration is so big, because it's like for, I mean, you know, really small RPM 1 to 5,000 to 8,000 stuff, or, you know, even some blower stuff on the exhaust. And they're so big that what they actually do is when it comes off of the base circle, instead of going in, it actually comes out. So if you look at the lobe, it'll come out like this and go back in, because it's just, there's not enough room to do it any other way because the base circle is so small. And that's the problem. Again, I don't want to get off in the weeds, but that's a problem with journal size, because our journal diameter determines the distance between the center line of the spool and the top of the lobe. So the bigger the journal gets, then the bigger the lobe can be, and then some of this can be alleviated. But when you're working, you know, in a package this big, sometimes you just have to do funny things, or it looks funny. I mean, we're just doing valve motion here, but it just visually, it looks funny when you look at the lobe and you can see it going out, you know. But the biggest takeaway from this, I hope, will be that you know what you can do with an existing profile, because like I say, I just, you know, it's call after call, and people want to do things that are not physically possible, and understanding what's going on, you know, will help you make sense out of that, I hope. And then eventually, when I get the little fixture made, you'll be able to see that. And then we'll go over this stuff some more, especially when I'm gonna do some stuff in the Cam Doctor on screen so you can see that. And we'll overlay some lobes on top of one another and illustrate more, because my drawing sucks, and I apologize for that. But hopefully that makes some kind of sense. And you know, that'll help you understand what we can do and what we can't do, and why we need all these different part number cores to be able to, you know, have enough stuff, enough variation to where we can grind all these different cams, you know, because the same core are you know, in the same family of cores. The same core that'll do 250 at 50 on 108 is not the same core that'll do a 240 at 50 on 116. And so we've got to have, you know, 43 different part numbers in each engine family, and that's a challenge, especially, you know, for grinders like me that are really small. It's a challenge to keep that much inventory ahead of time on the shelf, or to even know, you know, what you're gonna need. And the same kind of deal with regrinds, you know. There's so many different, well, some and some not so much, but you know, like I know in the Ford deal. There's all kind of different cores in the small block Ford. I mean, I think the Crown Vic's got a really tight, like a 107 or a 108 lobe separation. The Mustangs are like a 12 or a 13. The trucks are like a 16 or a 17. So there's a lot of variation there, and if you got the right core, you can do a lot with it. And if you got the wrong core, you know, there's just not nearly as much you can do. The Chevrolets, not so much. They don't vary so much. I think the LS1s were a 113, and like most all the trucks and the later stuff are in that 116, 117 range. I don't think there's really anything else. You know, I mean, some of the Corvette supercharged stuff, you know, it was like 120 or 122, something crazy like that. But you just don't see many of them. But the truck ones is what we see all the time. But so in lieu of all that, if you got questions to help me help explain it better, put them in the comments, and I'm happy to address them. But hopefully that made some kind of sense and you understand better. You know, especially when we talk to people on the phone, they just don't understand why I can't take this big cam and make it a little bitty cam. So hopefully that helps, and we'll see you on the next one.